if you give an argument for the existence of God, I can also see how the counter argument is just as logical. So just because something is logical also doesn't mean that it is true, right? There can be two possibilities.
Can I use him as an
that
example?
are mutually exclusive,
Yeah.
that are equally logical,
Yeah.
but one is true and one is not, right? Like, if we couldn't see outside, or we couldn't hear outside, there are no windows. Is it raining or is it not raining? It could be either one. They're both logical, but it either is or isn't.
All right.
That's the way that I see. That's kind of the way that I see God. Is like I struggle to understand what the actual necessity is. That's not based on defining where we come from, grounding morality, which I do believe God is necessary to ground morality, but that doesn't mean that in and of itself doesn't mean that God would be real inherently.
All right.
It's just for us to make sense of it.
I got to raise 3 of these little guys. Do you know what one of the biggest questions they ask is? Why? Is that your dad over there? Has he ever asked why? There it is right there. All the time. We can play that game. The only thing is it's really sad when you become an adult and you keep on playing that game. When you're his age and you keep on asking why, that's a good way to grow intellectually. But you know, we can play the game of why, forever and ever. And we will never grasp knowledge. We'll never grow in knowledge. We're just always asking why. In other words, it's easy to be a skeptic. But the question is, after you've finished asking why, you got to put your head on your pillow at night. And when you do, you're living for something or someone. And so the question becomes, what's the evidence that whatever you are living for is true? Does that make sense? Thanks, bud.
I think almost everything, like any morality or anything that have any sense of purpose, does come from theism, right? And again, like agnostic, not atheist, right? I'm not claiming to know. That's
okay.
That's the reason, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay, but let me tell you something. There's even more problems with agnosticism. You see, I can say, in answer to the question, Cliff, do you like Pepsi or Coke? I can say, I don't know, I'm agnostic. I don't know whether Coke is better than Pepsi. And it really doesn't matter. But you see, I can't say I'm agnostic about God because God deals with the question of human worth. And every single day I got to treat him like he's either trash or like he's valuable.
Right, I agree with you.
I have no choice. So I can't be agnostic when it comes to God. Because every day I got to make a decision, trash or valuable. If there's no God, he's trash. But if there is a God who created him in his image, he's valuable. And I got to make a decision every day about that. I got to make a decision every day. Steal from him or respect his property? Well, why would I respect his property if I need his property to get ahead? Why not steal? You see, that forces me to answer the question, is there an objective moral to not steal? And the only way there can be an objective moral is if there is some type of God to create and define it. Otherwise, it's all relative.
I absolutely agree with it. It's not that God is not necessary for morality to be objective. Rather, just something being necessary in order to achieve something else or to explain something else doesn't mean that it is. Like your car, if anyone drove here, this afternoon or this morning, their car had to start in order for them to drive here. But that doesn't mean that their car always will start. Same thing, God is necessary to ground morality objectively, otherwise it is subjective and applicable for individual interpretation. And as much as that's why I would like God to exist, but I can still see just because it's necessary to ground morality doesn't mean it necessarily exists.
That's correct. But guess what? The train has already left the station for you, bud. The car is already out of the garage. It's headed down the road. In other words, you're living your life. Now, based on your observation of life, based on your experience of life, which is the best, most sensible answer to the question, Is there a mind behind objective morality, or is there no mind behind objective morality? And I think it's a no-brainer. It's far more reasonable to believe that behind an objective moral, there's a mind, an eternal mind, God, than it is to believe, oh, there's some objective morals that I sort of agree with. No. If there is no God, there are no objective morals. There's relative morals, and all of my atheist friends are deeply committed to moral relativism, but they're not committed enough.
I would agree with you. And that's the point that I've been making. Is not that it's not necessary to ground morality, but just because something is necessary to explain something else or to ground something else doesn't mean that it just is true. Like the same with the car.
Yeah.
Like, in order to achieve your morality, to have your objective morality, similarly, in a way, in order to drive here in a car, God has to exist, just like the car has to start. But that doesn't mean the car is supposed to start, or that it does.
Sir, I think you're looking for an absolute certainty that is impossible to get. Prove to me that George Mason University is going to give you a diploma.
I've heard this before.
Oh, I'm glad you've heard it before. You're going to hear it again because I want other people to hear it again.
Well, that's a good point.
Well, thank you. It's a good point. Yeah, it sure is. You've made an incredible commitment to George Mason, right? You're a student here? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Where'd you go to school?
I didn't go to school.
You went to high school?
High school, yeah.
All right. So you made a tremendous commitment to the high school to graduate. Yeah, you worked. You had faith that on your day of graduation, the high school would grant you a diploma. Yeah, that's faith. You couldn't prove to me that the high school was not going to break that, right? Sir, the train has left the station. This is not a theoretical issue we're talking about. This is very practical. You're going to have sex with her? You're going to date rape her? You're going to wait for marriage? You got to make those decisions. You can't sit back and say, well, it's all subjective and theoretically, and maybe there's objective, maybe. Yeah, you're right, maybe. I'm sorry. Life doesn't give you that option. You have to make a decision. You're going to pay your taxes or not? Sorry. Life does not give you the option, well, I don't know. Yeah, that attitude will end you in prison for tax evasion eventually, probably. You can't live that way. So to demand absolute certainty before you believe something, before you make a decision, you can't do it. That will paralyze you.
Obviously, that point of not being able to prove anything, if you keep arguing it out, is absolutely right. Everything, at a certain point, you have to have faith that your eyes and your ears are telling the truth, right? So I understand that. But when it comes to other things, such as not stopping at a green light, or having faith that you're going to get your diploma, these are things that we see consistently that they happen. So it's not just blind faith, right? It's when I have faith that someone isn't going to run a red light, it's not blind faith. It's faith based off of evidence that I've seen, not evidence that. Like, of course, it's based off of.
Have you seen the mind of the driver who's coming towards the red light? Have you seen the frustration they're experiencing because they're late for a job interview? Therefore, to beat the red light might be the best thing to do. No, you don't see any of that. But that's a very big part of reality. It's not the total part of reality, but it's a humongous part of reality. Right? It's the unseen that we're talking about. And the unseen is very real. Have you ever seen love? No. Have you ever seen justice? No. Have you ever seen the value of integrity? No. And yet your experience of life should tell you these are very, very real. In fact, I ain't going to marry the woman who's an habitual liar. I'm not going to marry the woman who's an habitual cheater. Instead, I hold so tightly to these values that I want to get to know this woman before I marry her to find out if these unseen values are such a deeply held conviction of hers that it is wise for me to trust her. Otherwise, she's going to eat my lunch.
There's a whole other, arguments against the existence of free will. Not that we are not able to choose between what decisions we make, but rather than it's not a soul that's influencing us, but just the physical body and the fact that we're in advanced intelligence much past any other kind of life on Earth. So sometimes it presents us with itself in an abstract way that we might not, that we might like to recognize as we do things that we enjoy music or, X, Y, Z, the way animals don't. And that means we have free will and they don't. We have a consciousness and they don't.
Good.
And I can see that, but then, like I said, I would like God to exist, but I can't help but think also, what if that just comes from an advanced intelligence? It's so advanced that it starts to manifest in abstract ways like that, where it looks like what you would call free will. But
It does come from advanced intelligence. That's God. An advanced intelligence, a brilliant mind. Because remember, if there is no God, we don't have free will. Because if there is no God, reality is matter and energy. You've reduced it, which means I don't have a free will. I've got some chemical reactions in my brain. It's not a free will. I have to do what I do, and determinism wins the day, I'm convinced. And then reason. That's one of my biggest pieces of evidence that God exists. Reason. If there is no God, reason comes from non-reason. Do you believe that's possible? I don't. Because all of my observation is reason comes from a rational being. Reason never comes from inanimate matter. It's impossible. Reason comes from a rational being. That's why I'm convinced it's more reasonable for me to believe in the beginning God than it is for me to believe in the beginning nothing or in the beginning matter and energy. See, that's what Einstein said. Einstein pointed it out beautifully when he said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. I mean, where do you get off believing that this mind that you have to do good science and good study and get in touch with reality, where do you get off thinking, oh yeah, that's natural? No, that's not natural. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that we can understand it. I mean, that's weird. If this is an accident, and if the universe is an accident, there's no way that by exercising this accident, I should be able to understand that accident. So that's one of the reasons I believe in God, because of reason. Stuart, what do you think?
Well, you named some of them. What you named love, a lot of the intangibles of life. But I think you're an agnostic. I hate to say this. When agnostics come to the table and they say, oh, Stuart and Cliff, you guys have just sold out. I'm not saying you say that. You seem very genteel and thoughtful. But when they say that, I hate to say it, but I got to turn that back onto them and say, well, an agnostic is sold out just as much, if not more, than somebody who takes part in one of the major world religions. Because it's so easy for an agnostic to step back and say, I'm just not sure. A little more here, a little more there. I need more evidence there. My favorite analogy, I hope you catch this one, sometimes people just don't catch it, is the strong agnostics see the sunset and they run towards it because they think it's absolute truth, right? And just as they approach and get closer to the sunset, it recedes. And they're like, oh, okay, well, it's still there. Let me run towards it faster. And as soon as they get close to it, it just recedes and just keeps receding. The strongest agnostic I've ever encountered, I was sitting in my office one day and he just barges, probably a 75-year-old man, barges through the front door and yells, who's the chief philosopher here? And I said, well, I'm a pastor here. I'm definitely not a chief philosopher. But he said, all right, I'll take you. And I said, all right, sir, let's talk. And I mean, I thought this guy was going to jump across my desk and grab me. He was the most angry agnostic I've ever met in my life. And he was one of these guys who said, you're a total sellout. Now, we took a walk finally to his car together. And I said to him, sir, just like you think I worship an almighty God and I'm a sellout to that God, I think you just worship the search. And you're a sellout to the search. I didn't say that last part. I stayed calm, cool, and collected for the most part. And then I found out after that, he had a Down syndrome son, severely Down syndrome, in a class right across the street. And so that has to get you thinking, I wonder if there's some type of emotional bias behind it all. Because so many agnostics can act like it's just an intellectual thing when there's more emotional bias behind it than one could ever imagine. Let me ask you a question. Hold on. there's just as much burden of proof on you than us.
Right.
So what's the burden of proof that?
That's why I'm not making any claims. That's the point. It's like,
No. That is a claim.
no.
That is a claim. Saying I'm not making any claims is a claim.
Yeah, but I'm not making absolute claim to know one way or the other.
That's still, you have a burden of proof on your shoulders right now. I'm sorry, you do. Any good philosopher will tell you that.
Sure, but what I'm doing is
Okay.
was it you or your father who said stepping back and saying I don't know. I'm not stepping back. I'm walking forward and still saying I don't know, trying to know, but saying that I don't, because I would say faith is not a decision. You cannot you cannot decide to have faith or to believe in something. If something convinces you, you will believe it, and you may not act in a way that matches what you believe. But if someone is convinced of something, they are convinced of it. They are convinced of the existence. So it's not, to me, it's not like that. It literally, I could come and say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and I'll follow Jesus and all that. But if it truly is not clicking with me the way that it is for many other people, why should I? Is that the right thing to do? Fake it till you make it? Definitely.
No. Remember I told you the train has already left the station. The car is already out of the driveway. What I mean by that is you are making absolute decisions every day. In your ethics, in the way you view people as either trash or value, your understanding of your meaning and purpose in life, your understanding of whether there's life after death or not. You have decided. You just don't go to your parents' or grandparents' funeral and say, oh well, death is death, and that is, it just is. No, you've got to ask the question, am I ever going to see grandma or grandpa again or not? You have no decision. You're sitting there at the funeral, man. The train's out of the station, and you're making your decision. No, there is no life after death now, because you're agnostic. You're making a decision now. There are no objective morals, because there is no God. Now, maybe you'll change. Maybe you'll get to the point where you think there is a God and there really are objective morals, and maybe there is life after death, and maybe human beings really do have value. But you have no choice, because life is intense. It smacks you and me right in the face. We have to make these decisions, and the decisions that we make tattle. They tattle what we believe at this point. So to say, I don't know, is a cop-out. It's not accurate. Because you're right, intellectually you can say, I don't know, but practically, you got to live your life. The train is out of the station. It's going down the track. You have to make those decisions. Does that make any sense?
Sure. And as an agnostic, for the past 4 or 5 months since I started kind of, thinking about this and researching theology, I've been going to church. I've been trying to pray.
Good.
I have
Great.
spoken every single Sunday after Mass, and I speak with the priest.
Good.
As much as I can.
Yeah. But at this point, you don't believe there is a God.
But even if so what you're saying is, one or the other, there is no middle ground. But the thing is, what I'm saying is that I can not know, but still err on the side of caution and live my life.
Of course you can.
Right?
You can do anything you want to.
And live my life in a way that would be, following Christ. And
No.
but here's
He says you got to believe in him.
yes, and the thing, and maybe I need to take the classic communications, because I'm trying to say that I want to believe, but it's not something where it's not a split, like a decision like that. For me, if I'm not convinced, what can I do? How is that? That's the difference between like the true belief and then
You bet.
the facade, right?
What you can do is you're already doing it. You talk to the priest, you read the Bible, you read the Gospels. Read the Gospels. Check out this Jesus. Does the evidence point to him being reliable or does it not? But secondly, you got to be honest with yourself. And you got to realize I am making a decision. At this point, there is no God. I can call myself agnostic, but my life is being lived every day, every week, as if there is no God. Okay, but just be honest with yourself. Realize you're not just in total limbo, because the urgency of life forces you to make these decisions. Remember my analogy with Coke and Pepsi? You're right. You can honestly say, I don't know whether Coke or Pepsi is different, but you see, that question doesn't force itself upon you every day. The question of God forces itself upon you every day because it has to do with value of life, ethics, meaning in life, and life after death. And you got no choice. You got to live life. So it's smacking you up on the side of the head.
But wait, what do you think faith and belief is?
So I think faith and belief would be, I'd say they're probably a little bit different. Faith is more so trusting, and then belief is having an idea.
No, but what do you need to become a Christian, though? You keep saying this faith, like fake it till you make it. I want to know what you think faith is, because we may have a very different. We may as well not even have this discussion.
Essentially, seeing enough evidence, right?
Okay.
Not proof evidence, to believe, to have it, to trust that what you believe in is more than likely true, as opposed to just really not being sure, looking at something and seeing. Actually, there can be another explanation. That's why the answer is I don't know. As much as it like has to be binary, there's also the third option. I don't know, like which is where I'm at. And living in a way that honors Christ, going to church, doing all these things. Like if I tell you I believe right now, you know that that's not true because it doesn't just you don't just choose to do it. It has to, you have to see things that are convincing to you.
Like a relationship with a girlfriend. Do you just do it? Does it just snap, or what does it take?
You mean,
Yeah, I just don't understand. I don't think he understands either. When you say faith is just, turn it on. So faith is like the Super Bowl players that are about to just have faith that they're going to, sincerity that they're going to win this game. Is that what faith is?
That's what I'm trying to say.
It's not just turn it on. But you're saying you can't turn it on.
You can't believe something that you don't believe. It's not, you can't just, I guess you might be able to convince yourself, but if I don't believe, something, I can't just, choose.
Okay, so which part do you not believe? God doesn't exist. Jesus Christ maybe existed, or he didn't even exist as a historical figure. Jesus Christ existed, Son of God, or did he not even make those character claims? Was he not raised from the dead? Like, which part, I think you got to parse these out and say, which part do I not think that there's enough evidence for?
Well, when it comes to the historical, when it comes to the credibility of the authors of the Bible, a lot of people like to say, or even when it comes to the apostles, that a lot of the apostles were willing to die rather than renounce their faith. And why else would they be willing to die if they wouldn't die for what they didn't believe in or what they believed was a lie? But when you look at, there's plenty of examples in the modern world where people are not dying always for the truth, or even what they believe to be the truth, or rather just for what they subjectively believe to be the truth. So,
But they're not dying for what they know to be a lie.
no, even
That's what the disciples would have been doing.
No, but even if
Radically different than those flying planes in the buildings.
The greater good is religion giving structure, order, and morality to society.
No, I would not die. I don't think you're going to get thousands and thousands of people dying just for some subjective type of order to society. The Romans had the order. They would have risen up together and fought the Romans if they wanted that type of order in society. They would not have died for this suffering Savior who showed up and actually rose from the dead. That would not have been the way. Plus, nobody would have invented that, right? The Jews and the Romans, they had the opposite worldview. And Bar Kokhba, for example, and the 100 would-be messiahs right around Jesus' day, all were snuffed out like that by the Romans because they didn't have any type of evidence around them that they were truly the Son of God. I mean, almost the entire Roman Empire, it seems like, became Christian overnight, and they were all Jews because of this resurrection and the evidence behind it. It is just a leap of faith to be able to say, all right, here's some other historical idea that I can put in place to say that this was just some great hoax. And I don't think that's the one you want to go with.
No, I'm definitely not trying to, shake anyone or throw them off their faith.
Well, why not?
Or to even
If
say,
they don't have the truth, why not?
No, because I'm not saying that I know the truth. That's why, again, it's agnostic. I'm not telling you that that is what I think. I'm telling you that when I think of the way the Bible is written, the story that's told throughout the Bible, right? I can't help but to think there's another possibility of
Sure.
it being what I just said, even if it's a slight chance. So that's kind of the point that I was trying to make. Is not that not to try to disprove.
So what's the difference between you and doubting Thomas, between you and King David, between you and Habakkuk, between you and Jeremiah, between you and Elijah? The list goes on and on. Between you and Peter. What's the difference between you and those six figures?
What do you mean what's the difference?
You keep talking about your doubt and lack of certainty. They doubted all life long, or at least towards the end of their lives. Many of them had many doubts. They said, "Get away from me, Lord." They said, "I don't even know the guy." They said, "I'm never going to commit." They said, "I thought you were from everlasting to everlasting. You're a joke, God." I mean, they sound like stronger agnostics than you.
They sound like stronger atheists, right? And I'm not. What do you mean by what's the difference between me and them? In what way? How would you like me?
I'm wanting to know, how do you know that you're not just a Christian? Some Christians like to call themselves Christian agnostics. I'm a little nervous of that term. That's like a new trendy term. I don't think there are Christian agnostics, but I think there are Christians who doubt more than others. And so how do you know for certain that you're not just a Christian who has a lot of doubts?
Yeah, I guess. Could be. I mean,
Excellent. All right, man. This is great. Good conversation. All right, next.